Welcome to Powering Local Climate Policy, leveraging staff and policymaker relationships. I'm Jeremy Schrader, the Local Leaders Program Director for Climate Cabinet. We're a national organization dedicated to helping climate champions run for office, win, and then lead on climate. This is our approach because getting climate champions into positions of power is just the first step. Once they are there, they need to be supported to make the change we need. Climate Cabinet works with a national cohort of elected officials to implement climate policy, and one opportunity we've been working on is taking advantage of the Inflation Reduction Act's direct pay provision, which is an unlimited tax credit for many renewable and clean energy projects. However, for all the well-deserved hype, direct pay only solves many of the financing problems. Local elected leaders still face numerous difficulties in increasing the speed and scale of renewable developments. Today, we will have a rather unique look at one of the difficulty of passing and implementing local climate policy, working with staff. We have two climate champions with us who have each had both roles. They have worked both as city staff and held elected office. I'm excited to dig into how elected officials and staff can work better together to power local climate policy. Before I begin, we did have some technical difficulties, so you will hear us figure those out. But besides being mildly distracting, mainly for me, the rest of the interview provides great insight. Today we are joined by Russ Stark, who is currently the Chief Resilience Officer for the City of St. Paul, Minnesota. Before becoming the CRO, Russ served as an elected city council member for over 10 years, where he led on numerous issues, including climate. We are also joined by Mayor Patrick Hanlon of Hopkins, Minnesota, who is also the Deputy Commissioner of Sustainability and the Environment for the City of Minneapolis while he serves as mayor. I'm going to just jump into questions. And so our first question for both of you is, if you, in your opinion, what is the most important thing for staff and elected officials to do to accelerate climate policy? And I'll start, Russ, if you wouldn't mind starting.
Sure, Jeremy, thanks. I am getting a note that I can't have my camera on because the host isn't allowing me to, just so you know.
Let's take care of that. I will work on that while you, if you want to jump into that question.
Sure, happy to, and thanks for having me and setting this up, Jeremy. Pleasure to be with the group. At a high level, I think all of you know that politics is the art of the possible, and starting with the things that you can actually accomplish with the partners you have at the table, be they elected officials, staff, and others, is almost always the answer. And then the follow-up to that, though, is like, how can you also make more things possible in the future? Like, what are those steps you can take today that are going to lay the groundwork for the ability to move faster, further, maybe next year or the year after? And I think there's a number of there's a number of tools that as electeds you all have that I had back in the day at your disposal. But it really starts with figuring out where the common ground is among you and your colleagues, where the common ground may be with the people, and Jeremy, in your example, who are responsible for that municipal coal plant. Not that we have any of those here in St. Paul. But starting there, figuring out what you can do today, and then I think building those trusting relationships allows you to move faster and faster over time, to the degree that you're going to be able to. And then the other pieces I would add to that are using the platform that you have, whatever that platform is, but doing it in a way that doesn't throw your colleagues under the bus, I think is really critical. I think all of us in elective office have done that at times and seen the results, which is people not so interested in working with you the next time. And a piece of that is figuring out the real balancing act of working with outside organizations and groups who may want to advocate for certain policies or projects to move forward, figuring out the right balance of the kind of inside outside. And I used to talk to folks about the idea that FDR put forward many moons ago in talking to a bunch of organizers, which was that he said essentially, make me do it. Put me in a situation where that is the only clear choice, because my constituents and the folks around the community are demanding it. And so those are a couple of the high level ideas that come to mind, and looking forward to the rest of the conversation.
Great. Well, thanks so much for that. We'll get the mayor on, and there we go.
Here I am.
Next question would just if you could talk a little bit about what the most surprising thing was, going from staff to being elected. I'm sorry, going the other way for you.
I did go the other way. So I've been in the mayor's office for a little over 6 years now, and I used to talk about the transition as being going from the talking and deciding side of the hall to the doing side. And I think that was a little bit of a startling transition for those of us who end up being in public office for a while. Um, we wrestle with a lot of really big topics and ideas, and we have to know a little bit about everything as folks, representing communities or constituencies. There's a lot to know and understand, and it's really hard to go deep sometimes in any given area. And the transition was a big one, though, in large part because I hadn't been exercising those actual like doing and implementation muscles for the 10 years that I wasn't elected. And so the getting a much clearer view of what it takes to do the stuff that I was trying to push the city to do as an elected from the implementation side has been really eye-opening. And I think that's been the biggest transition for me.
Great. Uh, I think that's just such a fascinating point that I don't think people understand. I found people don't understand what it is to be an elected official, and that
Mm,
you're implementing, but you're not. When
mm,
folks talk to me and wanted to be an elected official, what they talked about, all the really cool things, that was the person that was staff that got to work on that. And so I appreciate you bringing up that point. Um, Want to go on kind of to the next question. What advice would you have given before this? Before coming on
mm.
to being staff, what would you have thought to say to another elected official that wanted to make big change? And also kind of how that advice, if that advice would change, as you've gotten into your new role.
Yeah, it's a great question, Jeremy. I got some really good advice when I started as an elected, and that was that I work at a city that's a little over 300,000 people, and so a fairly big operation, 3,000 employees, mid-sized city. And the advice I got was, city's a big ship. It's hard to turn it. If in a term or two you could have a big impact on 3% of what the city does, that would be a big impact. Choose that 3% carefully, um, which is to say that there's a lot going on at any given time. And so, really be thoughtful about the stuff that you decide to prioritize your time on. I know when I was an elected, one of the things that startled me in the early years was just all the stuff that's flying at you doesn't allow you a lot of time to decide how to spend your time. Um, and so those decisions about where to focus your energy become even more important in those circumstances. And then the follow-up piece to that is pick your battles carefully. Um, you've in order to get some of this stuff done, you've got to build some political capital and some relationships and some momentum. And so grab on to what you think is the biggest lever that you have, figure out the path forward, and it's going to take a while. Generally, to actually see it through to success. So that's and I would say, having moved over to this side of the hall now on the mayor's office side, the the my advice would change a little bit, and that would be with regard to, and every city is different, in terms of the structure of governance. I think that's an important caveat here. Here in St. Paul, we're a strong mayor system. And it's literally, I mean, council members have a lot of authority, but if an administration doesn't want to really go along with implementing the thing that the council passed, there are sometimes ways for them to really drag their feet. And so the the advice I would give in our type of system is really like figure out what you can do collaboratively with the executive branch, because you're going to really be picking a hard fight if you're constantly trying to do something completely different.
I really appreciate that as well. I mean, not going to stop saying that. I think that these are a lot of things that a lot of elected officials don't understand going in. There's a couple things I want to pick apart with your answer. How did you prioritize? Like one thing I was struck by was that the advice I got was make a plan, and I was like, that sounds good. I have no idea how it would do that. So I'd love to hear like how did you kind of prioritize?
And quickly, just to jump in, Jeremy, The mayor's in the attendees and just needs to be promoted up to panelist.
Yep, I see him. Thank you.
Awesome. So quickly, in terms of how to prioritize, to be honest, it took me a while. I mean, when you're just starting out, there's a fire hose of information coming your way, and you're trying to understand the players, how the systems work, and where those levers are going to be. You'd be a really rare duck if you saw the full picture, day one or even year one. Um, and so I think just like eyes and ears open, ears to the ground, and taking it all in initially is hugely important to get to that point where you're going to understand where you can have an impact, the things that are going to be possible, even if they are a little bit of a stretch goal, maybe initially. Um, and sometimes it can be really exciting to get involved in a thing, and then you look back on it, it's like it was a good thing, but it wasn't like it didn't actually accomplish all that much. And so that's where this advice of like figure out what those things are that when you succeed at getting them done, it's actually going to mean something both to you and to the community constituency. Those things are going to take some time.
Thanks so
Awesome.
much,
All
Inez.
right.
Go ahead, Emma.
Hey everyone, I'm Emma. I'm the deputy director with Climate Cabinet, playing tech backup today, and we're having some tech issues. So I'm just going to jump in um, with the next question. I would love to hear, Russ, about your experience moving from, not being in a position to pass climate policy to getting to the point where your city could really lead on this issue. Many of the folks in Climate Cabinet's local leaders cohort right now are the lone climate champion in their city or don't have enough allies to take bold action at this time. What would be your advice to them for how to get there?
It's a really great question. There's just to name a really prominent dynamic, which is the urgency of the issue and the moment. Like we have to do stuff fast and now, and it is the right instinct, and yet you really aren't going to be able to until you have the relationships, the trust, the buy-in to make those big moves. And so I feel like it starts honestly with your own approach to the work. I worked with other electeds who would play things pretty close to the vest, not be real forthcoming about their real outcomes that they were looking for, or where they were on a given issue. And I found those folks really hard to work with, frankly. And always just took the approach of being pretty clear about where I am in the given moment, the kinds of stuff that I care about and I'm trying to work on, and looking for partners to do that work. I definitely tried a couple of times just hitting people over the head with things and trying to force votes on things, and I can tell you that got me exactly nowhere. Um, and so really we have a small council in St. Paul, 7, so it was always a game of counting to 4 or 5 if you needed a veto-proof majority. Um, and that math is like the core concept of your work. Like there's very little you can do without bringing a larger group along. It's really hard work, just to name that too. I think a lot of us come into office with our supporters and friends having big expectations for what we're going to be able to do when we get there. And the reality is it's gonna take some time.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that you're in this on the staff side of it, how do you navigate different attitudes or strategies among staff? It's like another layer in addition to the getting to the 4 votes you need on the council.
Yeah, I mean, a very specific example, and I couldn't even tell you how this transition happened, but for years we've been trying to do more with starting to decarbonize our city buildings. And we've got folks in our facilities team who were pretty skeptical of the underlying goal of decarbonization. Some of them are engineers, some of them have been doing building related work for a long time, facilities related work. And, they're people who believe in the science of buildings and whatnot, but they'd been trained in an era where the currency was energy efficiency, and this decarbonization stuff, like moving away from fossil fuels, just seemed like impractical. And why would you even kind of pursue that? And we just kind of stuck with it, again, without ever really hitting anybody over the head. what I've seen is people who were skeptical a few years ago, and whether it's like the changing, conditions of climate change that we're seeing on the ground all over the country or here locally or whatever it was, I've seen people change and kind of come around to taking more direct action and to actually taking some pride in it. And I think for each individual, that's their own process. My advice in this area is the hitting people over the head doesn't work. You got to kind of bring people along slowly.
That's great. And I think we have Jeremy back.
Yep, I'm back as well as Mayor Hanlon. Thank you so much for your patience. Emma, if you want to just ask the next question and then maybe we can start with the mayor. And thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Sure.
I need access to camera as well. Same thing with Russ.
Well, I'd love to say that's going to work. I don't
All
have
right,
high
we'll just
hopes,
play it
so
by
I'm
ear.
saying let's go on to the next question.
Go ahead and shoot. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. I'm going to connect the dots between the last two questions I asked. And Russ, I'd love to hear your advice on how elected officials can better work with staff, or how you would appreciate that they work with staff in order to move the needle on policy.
Well, I want to give Mayor Hanlon a chance to jump in here, and I can follow. Mayor?
Yeah, I mean, I concur with a lot of the things that you were saying. In working with elected officials, it's the same in working with staff, is to come in and kind of have conversations about what's already been done. I'd say that's one of the things I was a little surprised about is coming in is just the levers of working at the City of Minneapolis and the levers and working at the City of Hopkins, to me, look very similar from working in both the cities. But the cities have very different perspectives and very unique perspectives of themselves. And so I learned maybe the hard way in a couple areas of taking a step back and sometimes me trying to talk about issues that I ran on and was working on. I got people on their heels a little bit. And so taking a step back and really letting staff come forward with the concepts that they want to work on, that they've been working on for a number of years, and how do you support that?
Chris, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other, again, in a strong mayor system, there can be some delicacy to reaching directly out to staff who are sort of below the director level in departments. Sometimes administration sometimes wants to know when the policymakers are having those conversations. And so I would say in some cases, just proceed somewhat cautiously. I always encourage people to start with department directors or even the mayor or executive's office first, and just be like, hey, here's the things I'm trying to do. There are relationships with executives where that's not going to get you anywhere. And in some cases, they're going to encourage their staff not to talk to you. I have seen that happen in local government. But the more you can just sort of, like I said, bring that authentic self to the table, just ask questions, actually rely on the expertise of staff. If you give staff an indication that you think they know something that's important, they're gonna give you their time, in my experience. And so I always start there.
Oh, that's great. I think one thing I can expand on that is just also, starting with the director is important, but also making sure, staff knows where you stand too. Don't assume that they know your campaign material. Like when I got in office, I kind of, in my head, I was like, the climate champions arrived. Let's do some stuff. And at the same time, yeah, no one really knew that. And so just creating a safe space for staff while being respectful to directors, it is just about building that really good relationship. I did want to go back to a question now that we've got the mayor on board. Mayor Hanlon, in your opinion, what would be the most important thing for staff and elected officials to do to accelerate climate policy?
Yeah, this is one that I see. I mean, I concur a lot with what Russ was saying. Is this is one area is I think knowing your role, right? Is if I'm a staff member at the City of Minneapolis, I have a specific role, and I'm not getting out ahead of council members and the mayor's office in terms of their relationship with the community. And as the mayor, like Russ, you talked about not overstepping those lines of governance, but also playing my role as mayor and as figurehead. to be able to speak to some of the issues. And when people are acting outside of their roles, whether it's staff acting outside of their role, it doesn't go over well. And as a mayor, me going over the lines of governance and getting into operational issues, but when you're all playing to your strengths, and me as a mayor, sorry, I'm switching hats a lot there when I'm giving that answer, but me as a mayor, when I'm playing my role as being the mouthpiece, people elected, as an elected official, they elected me to the position. And so in a lot of ways, they don't want to hear some of the aspirational things that are coming from staff, but staff are driving, the operational aspects and how all of that work is taking place across the city. So how can I speak for them in relaying that message and speaking to some of the other priorities that we might have as a city and allowing climate change to fit into some of those other priorities. What is really great about climate change is that it is also an economic development tool. It is, there are a lot of positives that you can speak to, even if you have more, we have a few more conservative members of council, and you can really speak about climate change, even if climate change may be not that important to them. But it is leveraging jobs, it is leveraging savings, it is leveraging federal dollars into our community. So I feel like that's a way that I can use my role to help advance some of the climate work in our city. And I guess the most important thing I think is playing your role. And when I see other cities, our city and other cities that do that well, that's where they're able to move the best and have the best programs, is when everyone's playing their role well.
Mayor, I'd love to expand on that a little bit. Then this will be kind of the final question, and kind of our 30-minute webinar here. It's something you're really trying to thread the needle. You've had staff that have been at the city much longer than you have, and that have made the city run through good times and through bad times. And at the same time, you're really trying to work toward a different future. With the current city budget that's been used and allocated in a certain way for a very long time, how do you show that economic benefit to staff that may have very different views, and how do you work toward that different future?
Well, very fortunate at the City of Hopkins that we have some great sustainability champions, not only that were there before, and that we're taking on some new staff. And so I think it's been a great relationship, is to be able to give a mouthpiece to some of the work that they've wanted to get done for a while. And so I think that's, again, playing roles is they have ideas and they have an understanding of what they want to do in the community. And so to be able to help push that on a political level that they may not have been able to do, and then they're able to push forward with operational pieces that obviously I shouldn't be below that line of governance. But you're right that there is a gray area in between of that line of governance, when policy meets operations with the city manager and then down onto staff.
Thank you so much, Mayor, and thank you both for such a great conversation. I have a couple of housekeeping items before we end up here. First, I will be hosting open office hours where we can discuss working with staff on Friday, May 31st at 2 p.m. Central Time. Second, I hope you all join us for our next webinar on June 13th at 1 p.m. Central Time, where we'll be focusing on zoning for climate, how you can leverage your local zoning laws to bring a just transition. Hope to see you there. So on that, I want to thank everybody, especially our esteemed panelists. Thanks, Russ. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeremy.